Hi, welcome to the Legex Show, a podcast that will help you simplify the business ecosystem. Co hosted by the co founders of Legex, Ayush and Vishesh. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Legend Show. And today we have Mr. Kumar Sangitesh with us, who is the co-founder and CEO at 1K Kirana Bazaar. So, Sangitesh, it would be great to, tell our audience something about your journey, how you started out, what this journey has been like.
I think for us, the journey was a blend of two key things that happened. One was obviously my experience during my Accenture days, where I was working a lot with these clients in the sales and distribution area. And secondly, while working at Blackbuck, which is is the second largest trucking startup in the country today,
Hmm.
I worked with these FMCG and food clients a lot. And one key problem that they always used to highlight was their distribution in these smaller towns of the country. And I could always relate to that. And the reason for that was that I myself belong to such towns.
Hmm.
I was born in Sitamarhi in Bihar, right? It's a tier three town, a district town in the northern parts of Bihar. And I grew up in Haldwani, which is in Uttarakhand. And that's again a tier three city. Now it has grown in size and it's now becoming like a tier two large town. But when I was growing there, it was again a very small town. And when I understood the problem that these guys were talking about, I could just relate that when I came out of Haldwani and started living and working in places like Bangalore and Delhi, I could
Hmm.
just feel the difference in exposure, difference in the kind of products experience that a consumer living in Haldwani gets versus a consumer staying in Bangalore gets.
Hmm.
And due to that, I just thought that this needs to be solved. I and one of my colleague at Blackbuck, Sachin, we decided that we'll start this company that will solve this distribution problem so that products can reach to these areas and consumers should get what they desire or aspire for. With that in mind, we started the company, and I think from there on, it has always been about solving that particular need, that solving for the consumers of Bharat, what they
Hmm.
need, how can that need be catered to, and how should my model be, my product market fit should be, so that I can cater to those particular consumers. So I think it has been a great journey for us, starting from a distribution platform to a more hyper local offline and online store network that we are
Hmm.
currently building. As you know, as I've been saying, it's all about small towns that we are looking at because India has more than 7,000 such towns, where
Hmm.
the population is hardly 50,000 to 1 lakh people. And just imagine places like Rewari or places like Dharuheda, Pataudi, Helimandi. Many of the people would not have even heard of these names.
Hmm.
And that's where we work. Those are our markets. And we have 1K Kirana shop in all these areas. So yeah, so that's what we do, that's how we started, and that's what our motive is, building for Bharat, consumers of Bharat.
So Sangeeta, when we talk about what you are doing over at 1K Kirana, what is the vision that this organization has?
So what we are looking to build today is, let's say, a combination of Walmart and Amazon for Bharat, right? And basically made for Bharat. So let
Hmm.
me just tell you what's the difference. See, most of the companies that have started in India, they have either replicated businesses from USA or businesses from China, right? So
Hmm.
if you look at Flipkart, it's basically a copy of Amazon. That's how Flipkart started, and it
Hmm.
serves similar kind of consumer segment, which is the large urban market where the per capita income will be, or monthly income will be more than 70, 80,000 rupees per month,
Hmm.
right? But if you think of Bharat in terms of GDP per capita where we are, we still don't go out and shop so much, let's say, in categories apart from grocery. Grocery still contributes 65 to 70% of our shopping in most of these towns.
Hmm.
Just let me give an example. We talk about a $1 trillion Indian retail market size, and out of that $1 trillion, $600 billion is food and grocery. So you can just understand it. If a community is spending 60% in food and grocery, which typically means that in terms of GDP per capita or the income profile of consumers in Bharat is not very high. Because just imagine if you're earning more, you will spend more in apparels, you will spend more in eating out, you will spend more in multiple other categories. But that's not true for India, right? So that's the first thing that we need to understand, that our retail consumption profile is more towards grocery.
Hmm.
Now, consider a scenario. The second macro that I'm going to talk about is basically about the participation of women in workforce. Now, imagine a grocery e-commerce company, right? Grocery e-commerce companies that are working in places like Gurgaon and Delhi. We have big
Hmm.
basket grocers of the world, and they serve a particular use case. They will serve either on the pricing side of the business, that if you're very sensitive to price and hence you want to buy from big basket,
Hmm.
or you have very time scarcity with you, where let's say in a family both husband and wife is working and nobody has the time to visit, let's say, a nearby grocery store. When there is a the entire phenomena of time preservation is there, that you want to preserve time, that's when a grocery e-commerce use case comes in.
Hmm.
Now, that's not true for consumers in Bharat, where 60 to 65% of consumers stay. There, they are looking for avenues to spend time, right? They want to go out. And since their entire consumption profile is so much inclined towards grocery, whenever they go out to shop grocery, and hence your offline stores are still so much in abundance and they control so much of business. Almost 95% of grocery purchase in India overall is from offline stores, which is general trade kirana shops.
Hmm.
So if you look at it for Indian retail, if you're looking to revolutionize it, you first need to focus on offline, because that's where the crux of the business is. And hence we decided that we need to focus on this offline part of the business. And that was the reason that we started building this hyperlocal network of both physical stores and then building a layer of digital on top of that.
No, that's interesting. So, when we talk about these 1K Kirana stores, how the experience of a person over there is.
So just imagine a scenario when you are going into your nearby shop and it's a 500, 600 square feet modern trade format kind of a shop.
Hmm.
What do you need from that shop? Once you need a freedom to browse. Hence, you move from a traditional store to a modern format store. That's the first upgrade that you have, right?
Hmm.
The second upgrade that you have is that you need everything at a single place. So if you are able to have larger assortment, let's say earlier you were just storing 700 SKUs, but now you have 1500 SKUs. So which means you get larger assortment at a single place. That is the second thing that you need. The third thing is information. Okay, this product, what is this product? What is the price running on it? What is the promotion that is currently running on it? If you look at when you go to, let's say, a place like Big Bazaar, you understand that if you shop something for 3000 rupees, you will get some benefit out of it. There is an average basket value on which you get some promotions or discounts. But the same is not true for your nearby kirana. But when it is a 1K kirana, all these informations are in place for you just on a consumer app, and you can actually shop from that consumer app. It's like there is seamlessness between offline and online store. Whatever you can see offline, it's present online, and hence the entire information asymmetry which was there, which you are not getting earlier, is now possible. So that's how the experience changes. You have freedom to shop. You have an entire consumer app through which you can just automatic check in and check out. And then you have all the assortment that you need at a single place. And obviously, price is a hygiene. You have to provide much better prices compared to, let's say, anywhere in that particular locality to win that consumer. So these are some of the pointers towards experience that we provide to our consumers in any market.
So, Sankitesh, one of the most amazing things that I got was that that 1K Kirana store is the Walmart for Bharat, with an additional
Mhm.
option to shop online like Amazon. But
Yeah.
when we talk about building this kind of hyper local network, which is that efficient, that customer driven, and that much more enriching in terms of user experience. So how have pictured this completely? That how 1K Kirana is gonna spend, what are going to be any geographic limitations, or how this is going to spend for us?
Yeah, so we are very clear that we need one 1K store for every 5,000 consumers, and rather in a dense area, one 1K store at every half a kilometer, right? So that's how we envisage this or vision this the network of 1K store. So typically that's why we talk about 50,000 stores in, let's say, next 5 years. So just imagine, I'll just give you a small example. In a city like Dharuheda, the population is just 50,000, right? In this city, we started our first store in Jan of 2020. Now, in the last 6 to 7 months, once that store started flourishing, people saw that a lot of consumer footfall is happening in these stores, and basically, consumers are flocking to that store, which basically means that the income of that particular Kirana owner or the franchise owner increased, which then led to other Kirana partners joining us. And today we have 8 stores in Dharuheda alone. So which basically means if you look at, let's say, 2 sectors of Gurgaon or 3 sectors of Gurgaon, you will have this kind of a population where 40, 50,000 people will be staying. And just 3 sectors, you have 8 1K Kirana Bazaar. In Dharuheda today, in every street that you will go, you will find one 1K store.
Wow, this is literally impressive. So, Sangeetesh, when we talk about building this kind of hyper local network, and when we talk about logistics, when we talk about finances, there's a much more operational cost that is incurred over there. So, how would you tell us about your journey that when you started out, how this has spent in terms of finances, in terms of your particular legal issues, in terms of your core operational issues that you faced.
So as we said, right, we started with a B2B platform. So, and any B2B platform is always very efficient in terms of distribution warehousing cost, because I'm not looking at a doorstep delivery, right? I'm looking at delivering in bulk to a particular store that is selling further to consumers.
Hmm.
Now, what happens in India? There is a myth that when you go rural, the distribution costs goes up, right? Which is true when it comes to, let's say, talking about a single manufacturer. So if I talk about from the lens of a single manufacturer who is trying to distribute its products in a particular locality, for him, the volume that a particular kirana sitting in Pataudi will be having maybe is hardly about 500 rupees, right? And for that reason, for that manufacturer, the distribution becomes unviable because it's not possible. But for me, I own the entire store, which
Hmm.
basically means, just imagine if you have a store which is doing a sales of around 3 lakh rupees a month. Every day he will be selling 10,000 rupees of goods, right? And if I'm to deliver him every second day, my average order value itself will be 20,000 rupees.
Hmm.
If the order value is so high, just by delivering to 5 or 6 stores, your vehicle utilization will automatically happen. And hence, now it's the entire cost of the distribution is driven only by the distance that you are traveling, nothing else. Vehicle will always be utilized. Most of the companies, which are e-commerce companies, and they are looking to, let's say, optimize their distribution cost, they keep running after density in a particular area to get their vehicle utilized.
Hmm.
Because if you have density, then you can get more orders, and hence your vehicle utilization will increase. For us, that's never a challenge, because just by having 5 or 6 stores in a particular beat, my distribution cost gets optimized,
Hmm.
right? So in terms of logistical challenges, I think it's much easier if you control the entire assortment of a shop. I think legally we never faced any challenge till now,
Hmm.
and I don't think there should be any in the coming days as well. I think we consult our lawyers as well before going deeper into any of these markets. So I don't think legally there is any particular issue.
Hmm.
In terms of finances, I think there are 2 parts to it. One is obviously the capital financing for any particular retailer
Hmm.
or any kind of particular franchise partner who wants to join us. Now, typically for the last 10, 12 months, we have been looking at partners who can invest the amount that we are asking from them. And with the time, we have actually increased that investment part, because with if you have good people investing a particular amount of capital, obviously the income that they can get out of it is much higher.
Hmm.
Now, on the second part, obviously, we have more than 100 leads with us that we are not able to convert into a 1K store just because of, let's say, lack of investment from these guys, that they don't have that kind of a capital.
Hmm.
And that's where now we are looking to get some working capital partners who can provide those capital to these guys, maybe an NBFC or any new fintech company that has come in, who can partner with us to provide that capital to these guys, so that these 100 guys can also partner with us and come on 1K platform. So I think that's one part of the financing problem. The second part of the financing problem, or other finances, I will say, is obviously the dependence on cash in India for shopping. And how do you manage that, right? It's a challenge right now, but I think with more and more digital platforms coming up, digital payments catching up with the consumers, we are seeing that this will also be get solved. So we already are getting almost 30% of our payments today through swiping machines and UPI codes. And as we are growing, we are also looking at partnering with some of the companies who serve as virtual ATMs, through which, so see, cash collection, the problem is not that a retailer cannot transfer amount from his bank to me. The problem is depositing cash from a Kirana shop to the bank, right? That's the fundamental problem. And for that, we are thinking that if you partner with somebody who is providing a virtual ATM services, the cash will automatically get routed to the bank account of the retailer, and he can provide cash to the consumer who has come to, let's say, get the cash from ATM, right? So that is something that we are looking at, so that this cash collection part also gets gradually sorted. So I think these were the challenges that we are seeing, but I think we are focused on building solutions around this. We are also looking at adoption of online as much as possible. So when I say online, again, I am not looking at doorstep delivery. So I keep on harping on that, just because whenever we talk online, it's always delivery at doorstep that comes to your mind. But when I say online, it means that the consumer is shopping online and picking up the goods from the store, or is shopping in store only, building the cart and then doing automatic checkout. In all these cases, he has an option to pay online directly. So that is the third thing that we're looking to experiment and increase, maybe incentivize the customer more to pay online directly to us, so that this cash collection problem can be solved. So as I said, these are the challenges that you face, but obviously there are solutions that we are looking to build around it.
No, this is amazing, Sankitesh. So, Sankitesh, would really love to know some insights on how you personally started out, what your personal journey has been like. So, you mentioned that you
Sure.
started from Bihar, you moved to Haldwani, then worked in Bangalore. I also say that you were in I am Ahmedabad for a while, then you are moving to Delhi. So, how this particular journey has been like?
Yeah, so really exciting. I think coming from Bihar, obviously, when I was in undergrad, my parents always tell me you should write UPSC, right? Which is something that I think most of the guys born in Bihar, one or the other time get that thought that should I write UPSC. But I
Yeah,
think it was around,
exactly. And I think it,
yeah,
it just not translates to particularly in Bihar. I think most of the middle class families go through this because
yeah,
there is
yeah,
such a charm and allure around this particular exam that that people
yeah.
just do not try to evolve out of that.
Yes. So I think for me, we came out of Bihar very early when I was just 6 years old.
Hmm.
And post that, I lived in Chhattisgarh for 2 years, where my father was posted.
Hmm.
And then I think around 1995, my father moved to Haldwani. And then my schooling, even my college, undergrad, everything happened in Uttarakhand only.
Hmm.
It was during my college days that I decided that I don't want to do UPSC,
Hmm.
and I think there was two options very clear to me: either go for an MBA or go for GRE exam.
Hmm.
I opted for MBA, and because I was knowing that I have to do and get into business education.
Hmm.
I think the reason behind that at that point of time was nothing about that I'm very excited about business, because I come from a background where both my parents are professors, right?
Hmm.
And they are coming from educational background. So it was not about business. I think for everybody at that particular age, it has always been about CTCs that you are going to get,
Hmm.
right? And that's true for me as well. When you look at the media publishing that, okay, this guy got a 1 crore package from this particular IM, you get excited about it.
Hmm.
So with that in mind, actually, I wrote CAT, got through it in 2010, and then moved to Ahmedabad.
Hmm.
And after my MBA, I think that was the time when I got real exposure to. So till this time, as I said, I was part of. So my studies, everything was in Uttarakhand. I worked for around 2 years with Ashok Leyland post my undergrad, and then when I reached Ahmedabad, that's when I met a lot of people which were intellectually more capable than me, right? And one thing that I learned from there, that more than any educational institute, it's the peer group that actually excels you and takes you upward, right? And you learn more from your peer group. So during that time, I think we decided that 4 years, 5 years from now, after pursuing my MBA and understanding and getting exposure to all these subject matters that an MBA teaches you, I
Hmm.
decided that at around 4 or 5 years from today, I will start my own business, because that was something that was exciting me.
Okay.
Because I was always part of this college communities, college fest, where you actually get that exposure to meeting people, leading people. And I thought that this is something that I'm good at,
Hmm.
managing people and working with them and leading them. And I think that actually that was the time when I decided I need to start my own business. Post that, I worked with Accenture Strategy, as I told, and there also I was fortunate enough to go through almost 5 6 projects during my 4 years of career.
Hmm.
Worked with multiple clients across sales and distribution area, and project planning and EBITDA improvement on shop floor. So I have seen almost manufacturing to sales to project planning, everything, whether it is support functions, business functions, direct sales functions, everything was there that I got an exposure to. But one project that actually influenced me a lot was this project Neve, which was basically establishing this rural distribution network in the western parts of Bihar. Almost, I
Hmm.
was handling 16 districts. And what we are developing was a block level field force who was going to generate leads for my client, and those leads were getting converted into proper sales through a separate channel. And that's when I saw real India. That's where I hired almost 300 people who were coming to me and joining me to get 4,000, 5,000 rupees per month as salary. And
Hmm.
it was very, very critical for that. It was my job to get that salary to them, paid to them through my client. And after that, I decided that if ever I decide to do or run my own business, it has to be for this particular consumer segment, this particular area where I can help in the growth of these guys.
Hmm.
So with that in mind, I think then once I completed my tenure at Accenture, I decided that I also need to get some startup experience. That's when I joined Blackbuck, got into a startup, understood how a startup is run, how do you scale from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 10. And after getting all that exposure, once I got the opportunity and decided that this is the time to start my own venture, I just moved out and started Neotail. So it has been a journey of, I think, I say it is like finding the cheese, right? That how do you uh, start from one place, get the learnings in and around whatever is happening, and then finally look for the problem that you want to solve, and then go ahead and solve it.
Oh, that's as amazing as a statement could be. Because there are a lot of things that you need to plan ahead, and there are a lot of assumptions that you have. So how did you
Yeah.
venture around testing those hypotheses, testing those particular market assumptions, and just scaling out on these confusions?
Yeah. So when we started out, I think we were trying to make a niche for ourselves, right? So in 2019, when we launched our B2B platform, there were companies who were already either mid-size or large enough in a startup space who have raised almost more than tens or hundreds of $1 million.
Hmm.
So, starting a B2B business with that particular competitiveness and being, let's say, crowdy, we thought the right approach will be to get into a market where you have, let's say, less competition, and also try to find a way through which you can make your business much more sustainable and defensible, right? So with that in mind, we decided that if we have to run this business, we need to work directly with brands and get their exclusive distribution contracts, right? It was a good idea, and that business is a really good business even today, where you find distributors working for companies like Unilever or Cadbury's of the world. And but it's a ROI business where people generally get 18 to 24% ROI, and there is hardly any play of technology, right?
Mhm.
So most of the technology there is owned and controlled by brands themselves, and we realized this once we got into the system, got the distribution contract from some brands, and started working. And within 3 months, we realized that yeah, in this particular model where I am trying to get distribution contracts from brands,
Mhm.
there will never be any disruption that can come from technology until unless you are so big in size that brands are taking you seriously,
Mhm.
right? And going to that size will mean that you raise a lot of money and quickly grow. And considering that the market is crowded, that is also difficult. But we still thought that it's better that we focus on smaller brands, challenger brands, because that's where you will not face this problem. They will be eager to join hands with you, and then you can start building on that. So that was the first pivot that we did, from direct distribution contracts to, let's say, solving for challenger brands.
Mhm.
When we started doing that, we realized that most of the brands in the country which are smaller, they follow a pattern, right? If you are large, then you will think about your partners and distributors. But if you're small, the only thing that you think about is how do you increase your sales. And for increasing your sales, what you need is a lot many partners, not one partner, because then you will be very dependent on that particular one.
Mhm.
And hence, for smaller brands, the challenge was that they were always looking to get as many distributors as possible. And hence, the scalability was always a challenge, right?
Mhm.
So on one side, there was no disruption. The first pivot that we did post that, the scalability was a problem. And then we thought rather going for contracts, let's make a B2B wholesale platform itself, which was very much similar to, let's say, what Jumbo Tail does in Bangalore.
Mhm.
Now, with B2B wholesale platform, I think that's when the problem of stickiness and loyalty started coming in, right? The customers or the retailers that we thought are very loyal to us are buying from us. Actually, most of them used to think that why can't they buy directly from a distributor? Why do they need a wholesaler to come in between?
Mhm.
And as they will grow further in size, their entire aim was to get directly to a distributor and not to a wholesaler. So long-term defensibility, even when you are doing a B2B wholesale, was really problematic until unless you are solely focused on staples. You understand, like food grains, right? Food grains, there is no distributor, there is no brand, and you can create a business out of that, which I think Jumbo Tail has done successfully with Jumbo Farms. Shop Kirana has done that successfully with their own Kisan Kirana
Mhm.
line of products. And I think we could have done that and moved into that direction. But we also realized that in the entire value chain, the the value or the power will always rest with the people who owns the consumers, right? That was a key learning for us, that if you
Mhm.
are somewhere in between the value chain, you will never make or never impact anything. If you want to impact, you have to own the consumers. That's why even B2B players create their own private labels. If Jumbo Tail created Jumbo Farms, they wanted to create a consumer brand so that consumer can ask for that, and hence Kirana has to keep it. Similarly, Shop Kirana, when they launched Kisan Kirana, they were also looking to create a consumer brand so that consumers ask for it and Kiranas have to keep it.
Mhm.
So it's uh, as I said, that the power rests with people who owns the consumers, and
Mhm.
everybody else in the value chain is just an intermediary, right? And so with that particular piece of the puzzle being solved, we decided that it's better to move to a business model where you can own the consumer, and hence we moved from a B2B business to a 1K Kirana Bazaar, which is a franchise business. Because now
Mhm.
every consumer that is coming to a 1K store, he is coming there because 1K is able to provide a value to him, which earlier was not even possible because my value used to end at the Kirana point. I never used to go beyond that. Right. So I
Okay.
think it has been at least 2 to 3 pivots post that we have come to a model where we are today. And I think even in future, I think we have to do more pivots because that's how a company keeps on moving and
Mhm.
get to the right point. If you ask any startup founder even today, this is not about that, okay, you have come in the space, you have decided a business model, and that business model will make your company a success. What is important that how much are you innovating and how much are you closer to the market, how much are you learning and iterating the entire process again and again. That's how all the large companies have built in India or anywhere in the world. The
Mhm.
iteration process is very very important, and being closer to the market is very very important. If you are doing these two things, I think one day or the other you will reach a point where you will have a very good product market fit and people will be looking for your product.
And Sangeetesh, this is one of most wonderful insights that someone has said on the podcast, because this is even a personal belief of mine. I have said it 1,000 times, and I'll repeat it even 1,000 more. That one of the most thing that we find in startups is that people do not really want to iterate. They just think that they have one hypothesis, it's gonna work out, they test it and they move on if it doesn't work out, and say that startup is a failure. So how you would like to frame around that?
So that's not true at all because see, first is the picture that you have in mind, right?
Mhm.
When I started, I envisioned that I will have or I will be owning the consumers in Bharat. Even when I was talking about a B2B platform, the idea was always there that in 5 years I will have my own franchise store network because
Mhm.
that's where I always saw that this business will have the moat. Anybody used to ask me, what is the moat for, let's say, a B2B business? Because you are selling somebody else products, right? You are
Mhm.
selling the product of, let's say, a brand like Unilever or Cadbury. So what is the moat? And the moat always used to be, I will have my own franchise network, I will have my own products, and my network will be my moat, right?
Mhm.
Even today, when I talk about it, the moat is same. I will have my own franchise network, I will have my own products, and I will have my network as my moat. The moat has not changed, just the model has changed. So
Mhm.
you need to understand the business that you are looking to build. What is the vision? There can be multiple paths to that vision. Some of that path will be having the right market fit and some of that will not. That's why you need to iterate so that you can pick the right path to reach there, right? And I think that's why anybody who is looking at a hypothesis, if it fails and you leave it and you say that a startup is not working, I
Mhm.
think you never wanted to run a startup.
No, this is amazing, Sangeetesh. So Sangeetesh, any particular kind of learning experience, or a particular setback that you would like to highlight on? That
And I
at
think there
at
was
some
a
point of time it always comes to to everyone's brain that what is it that we really are doing. And sometimes it's a setback, sometimes it's a particular when we talk about a reality check. So one experience that you would like to to tell over here.
sure. So I'll give you. There was one reality check that actually changed everything for us, right? Uh, so around 2019, around
Hmm?
September or October, when we had run the B2B business for 5 6 months, and considering all of the founders were coming from very strong background, and we thought we have the right pedigree, we have got the right model, and everybody told me that if you prove unit economics in B2B distribution business in FMCG, you
Hmm?
will get the funding, right? And you can then scale it faster. We thought we have done that. That's when we went to the market in the month of, yeah, September 2019. And within, I will say, 3 months, we got the reality check
Hmm?
that nobody in the startup ecosystem today is interested in a B2B business because everybody has a hypothesis that a B2B FMCG and grocery e-commerce will not work, right?
Hmm?
And apart from, let's say, Udan already raising so much of money, and then you have Flipkarts, Walmarts of the world, even when they are struggling on the B2B side of the business and not able to monetize it or make good unit economics, how will a small company do that, right? So I think that was the first reality check.
Hmm?
Even then, we got interested. They came to the market, and in front of us, there was a retailer who was saying that, as I said, that I am taking material from them. But let's say tomorrow I get a direct link to a distributor or a brand, I will leave them. Well, just imagine the scenario that
Hmm.
you thought this is a loyal retailer and
Hmm.
he is a loyal customer and he will keep buying from you. But in front of, let's say, a particular guy who is going to invest in the company, he's saying that, boss, I will buy from somewhere else
Hmm.
as soon as I get the right place where I need to be connected, which is a brand appointed distributor. With these two incidents, I think we got the reality check that there is something wrong.
Hmm.
Maybe we are not closer to the market. We need to go back to the drawing board, understand what is wrong, and build again. And that's when we just changed the entire business model. We said, yeah, in this fashion, every retailer that I'm going to work with
Hmm.
will always be looking for somebody who can give him much higher margins. And if you look at India, the kind of country that we are, there is tax evasion that happens. There is spurious products, duplicate products that are sold.
Hmm.
Hence, the entire benefit of margin will always be overhauled by somebody else, right? And
Hmm.
the stickiness, the loyalty you will never receive from retailers. And hence, we thought the best model will be to own the consumer, as I said. And I think 2019, September, October, this happened. December 2020, we launched our first store.
So,
Sorry, not December 2020, December 2019. Rather, January 2020, we launched our first store.
in Jan 2020, we launched. No,
Yeah.
that's amazing pivot. Within a few months, we were able to get back to our feet. And how did you sealed the particular there is a particular anxiety flow in the organization. There are teammates who are struggling with gripping the idea around a new thing, and there are always these people who either at one point of time do not believe in what we are doing, or at some point of time do not see the picture that we are trying to see. So how did you handle that particular tumultuous period?
So first thing was, obviously we were very small at that point of time. I think apart from us founders, there were hardly 4 or 5 employees in the company, and then most of the
Hmm.
guys who were hired were actually ground executives. So I think
Hmm.
the anxiety was, I will say, and the entire team was less. Rather, as promoters, we were a little disturbed, like what to do now, right? We thought that we are going to conquer the world, and now this is the first setback that has just come in 6 months of operations.
Hmm.
But we also saw the headwinds. We saw the macro factors that are governing, let's say, the economy, and
Hmm.
then we saw our own vision, that what we wanted to achieve. And when we did all of that analysis, as I said, when you go back to the drawing board,
Hmm.
that's when you get to that idea which is going to actually change the entire mood of, let's say, the room, right? So till the time you are sitting on the same problem and thinking about it, the anxiety will never go.
Hmm.
But if you get over it by thinking about a new idea or the better way to do the, so it needs a entire analysis, introspection, everything that you have to go through. And I
Hmm.
think we did that for almost 15, 20 days. That should we move to a retail network model, or should we just continue? Should we continue both the models, or should we focus on only one? Whether I should
Hmm.
continue B2B, or I should just focus on building a franchise business. And we took calls on all of that, right? And just decided that we should start building the franchise network business from today.
Hmm.
I think that was the time when a lot of Oyo for Kirana model were also coming up, and we thought that this is where the next momentum in terms of or building for Kirana will come into picture.
Hmm.
And since our entire focus was on solving for consumers, we thought this is the best model right now where we should go and focus on and build that.
Hmm. And how about the funding stage of 1K Kirana right now? Like how you
So
funded it, how the stage is right now, and are we looking for anything in the future?
yeah, so we our B2B business got seed funded, I think, back in April 2019.
Hmm.
And when we pivoted, then we raised a bridge round, which was closed somewhere around December of 2020. So it started in June 2020, right after pandemic hit us,
Hmm.
and we continued that for almost 6 months. And December 2020, we closed it. So yeah, and now we are looking to raise more funds to scale further, and I think looking for Series A
Hmm.
to take us to more districts in Haryana. So we are looking to launch ourselves in 15 more districts in the next 1 year.
Hmm. So, and
Yeah.
how does our finance sheet right now looks like? That how cash positive it is, how intense we are, on
So
how aggressively we are pursuing this market.
So we are unit economics positive. Our contribution margins are really good compared to any of the competitors in this area. And since we serve the markets where there is a lot of local and regional brands, unit economics and gross margins are always better compared to, let's say, a larger city like Delhi,
Hmm.
where you have a lot of larger brands fighting for the pie. So yeah, so in that regard, I think we are really settled and good in
Hmm.
terms of our unit economics and contribution margins. Now, if you look at our major areas where we spend is building the tech, right? And 50% of my expenses are technology expenses. And the reason for that is that we are looking to build three key products. One is your entire warehouse management system and backend. Second is your store management system, which is the point of sale software at the store point.
Hmm.
And third is the consumer app, which is the linkage of 1K with consumers. And all these three products are interconnected with each other. So let's say if I sell something or send something, let's say I'm sending 12 pieces of Pepsi from my warehouse to a particular store, that get automatically updated on the store inventory and also on the consumer app. So
Hmm.
that's the kind of connection that we have. Now, if he sells anything on the POS or anybody buys something from consumer, the store inventory goes down accordingly. So now we are building all these three stacks together, and all of them requires their own thinking, own conceptualization, and I think that's where most of our expenses go.
Hmm. So Sangeetesh, whenever we talk about building a startup, we got to think about technology, we got to think about finances, we got to think about operations, and how would you, prioritize them? That what is the one thing that we should prioritize more than the other?
So I think first thing is obviously, if you are in this space, you are building a startup, then any conventional logic of business will never make sense, right? That makes sense, but you have to think of a way where you are able to disrupt that thinking through technology, and hence technology becomes critical. Secondly, at an early stage, you also need to be thinking a lot about finances. And instead of, I think, obviously, profitability is something that you need to look at. That how does your unit economics work? How will
Hmm.
it look like, let's say, when you grow? But the bloodline of any startup in early stage is cash, and hence you need to be very careful that where you are spending, how you are spending, and what is your cash status at any point of time.
Hmm.
If you get a lot of funding at the start, I think your entire focus on cash management becomes very low. Whereas if you grow gradually, the focus on cash management is very high, because that's what you have to sail through.
Hmm.
Right? You have to be really choose between where to invest, what resources to invest in, which is the right way to invest in. So I think that becomes very critical. So first thing, obviously, what you're making, and accordingly, tech becomes very critical, because if you're not building tech, then I think there is nothing about, let's say, a startup being there. A startup today, whatever you're building, is more about solving, let's say, conventional problems through technology. So
Hmm.
tech is really critical, and second is obviously finances, managing cash.
So Sangeetesh, when we have came to choose the options, I would really love your views on these. So I would give you two options, and you got to choose one of them, and
Okay.
justify that a slight bit. So Sangeetesh, here it goes that whenever we talk about the initial days of a business, what do you think is the first priority? Having growth or having ethics in place?
I think having ethics in place is the first priority always.
Hmm.
It cannot be having growth.
Hmm.
Reason being, in any organization, the culture that you build from the start
Hmm.
is the culture that you will live through, right? Compromising ethics at one point of time for growth and then saying that later I will get ethics into picture and I will compromise on growth will never work, because, and specifically it comes from the founders side, right? So if the founders are saying that I'm looking to compromise ethics because I need growth right now, will not work, right? So you have to be always you have to be cognizant about the fact that in an organization, founders are the ones who are driving the culture. So whatever
Hmm.
culture you will sow today, that's what you will reap, let's say 3 years, 2 years down the line.
Hmm.
So I will say it's always about uh, having ethics in the company.
And what would prioritize more? An amazing co-founder, who gives you a particular complementary skill set, or an amazing investor, who fills your, pockets with a lot of cash?
At the early stage, I will say, good question. That's a tricky one, right? But I think complementary skills with amazing co-founder
Hmm.
is something that I will prioritize. Obviously, but you cannot run the business without investment as well.
Hmm.
So, very very difficult to answer. I think both of them are very very much needed.
Hmm.
But when you're starting up, let's say, so again, entirely depends on the juncture where you are. When you are very like the first day of your startup, when you're starting up, you don't look you look for both. But I think at that point of time, if the company needs money, you will first look for an investor and then look for co-founder. Co-founder will gradually come to you, right? But investor is something that you need at that point of time when you're starting up. If you have capital, if you have good runway, your business is very good, then obviously you will look for a co-founder.
Okay, and when we talk about an organization goals, what is the one thing that we should look out at? The long-term goals or the short-term ones?
So I think the first thing obviously is to look at. So again, in any organization, if I talk about it, there are two ways the functions happen. One
Hmm.
is the strategic functions, and the second is the normal business functions. The business functions
Hmm.
focus on the short-term goals, right? And the strategic functions focus on the long-term goals. Now,
Hmm.
if you're a startup today, the more focus you will have on short-term goals, because an early stage startup will always be looking at 1 week, 2 week, 3 week down the line, right? What is
Hmm.
happening? Because if you're looking to iterate, you need to understand the results or get the results very quickly of every experiment that you are running, and hence you need to be very much focused on short-term goals.
Hmm.
As you grow, right, and let's say you move from an early stage to a growth stage company, that's where I think you divide these functions. You still need to have short-term goals, which the business functions will drive, and the strategy functions will always looking for 2 years, 3 years down the line.
Hmm.
I think there is a interview of Jeff Bezos where he clearly says that today, me and all of my top management, they
Hmm.
don't think about the next quarter. They think about the quarter which is 2 years away from today, right? So when you are big, that's what your top management thinks about. When you are small, you need to look at very short-term goals.
Sounds amazing. And when we talk about execution, what do you think that is a particular key ingredient? A very quality execution or a very quantity execution?
Depends on the type of business that you are doing, but I will rather prefer a quality execution than a quantity execution,
Hmm.
because if you are doing a quality execution, you can always build on quantity in the future, right?
Hmm.
Because your core is set, you understand the market really really well, right? And
Hmm.
that's when you can scale. But if your core remains weak and you
Hmm.
focus more on quantity at the start of the company,
Hmm.
it becomes very difficult to build quality when you are very big. Just imagine you have already built an elephant and now you are thinking that you want to turn him around.
Hmm.
Not possible. It will take huge amount of effort, right? But if you are very agile from the start and you have built a right core, then I think if you keep on building on that, it will be much easier to build quantity post that.
Sounds awesome. So Sangeetesh, it has been a very amazing discussion with you. I really loved your insights on the kind of product market fit when we discussed about finances, when we discussed about how an organization should run, learning about her journey. So Sangeetesh, any parting advice or any particular kind of suggestions or recommendation that you would like to give to our audience?
Yeah, so as you said, most of the age group here is like 18 to 25 years of old, and
Hmm.
they are very young. So I think at early stage, when you are so young, learn as much as possible from others, right? No,
Hmm.
nobody is asking you to jump and start something, let's say, just because there is a wave going on for startups.
Hmm.
First you need to see that what are the gaps that you have, what is it that you want to understand from the market, and you have to be in the market to understand that. You cannot run a startup sitting in a AC office until unless you are building something very core tech. Even
Hmm.
there you have to have like some consumer insights, that what are you building and for whom you are building. And hence I think being observant and learning from in and surrounding from your surroundings is really really critical if you're looking to build something in future,
Hmm.
right? Test out your leadership skills, try to take as much leadership opportunities as possible, that because that will be very handy when you are looking to build a team, right? So I think those 2 points, something that I'll just I would see, I would like to see the young audience of today looking at. Learn from your surroundings and look for leadership opportunities that you can get.
Sounds great, Sangeetesh. Thanks a lot for joining me on the Lajak show. And it has been an amazing session with you. Looking forward to getting again you on board.
Sure, Vishesh. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me, and thanks Akarshit for organizing this.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, sure.